The day started like any other on Earth. A bright, sunny morning, the hum of life moving forward in its usual chaotic rhythm. But all that changed in an instant. On the outskirts of the Earth's capital city, a memorial was being held for a child, an innocent, bright-eyed girl named Alara. She was only 7 years old, but her dreams were grand, untainted by the harsh realities of the world. Her smile had been infectious, her laugh a melody that made even the darkest corners of the world seem a little brighter. Alara was the heart of her community, her family, and to many, the symbol of humanity's future. That was until the day she was killed, brutally, without warning, and by the hand of an empire far beyond their reach. The Galactic Empire, a sprawling authoritarian regime that controlled dozens of planets across the galaxy, had long viewed humanity as inconsequential. They had made their disdain for Earth's primitive society known in their cold, impersonal communications, treating humans as little more than a nuisance. However, no one had expected the events that transpired that fateful day. It happened on a bright afternoon, when a shuttle from the Empire, on a diplomatic mission, landed on Earth's surface. The diplomats, official representatives of the Empire, were supposed to bring a message of peace, of cooperation between worlds. But instead, in the span of moments, a tragic accident, or so it was claimed, unfolded. The shuttle's captain, an officer named Captain Valiner, was said to have lost control of his vessel during takeoff. The shuttle careened off course, landing violently in the middle of a small park where Alara and her friends were playing. The explosion that followed consumed the child instantly. Her parents, heartbroken and shattered, were among the first to reach the scene. The sheer force of the blast left nothing but ashes. And though it could have been written off as a horrific accident, something in the air felt wrong, too wrong to ignore. The message that was sent to Earth was one of cold indifference. The Galactic Empire made no effort to apologize, offering only an official report blaming human error. But it was clear to anyone who looked closely that there was no real remorse, no acknowledgement of the life lost. Within hours, the news had spread across the planet, and with it, a wave of shock turned into fury. Earth had always maintained a policy of peace, striving to engage diplomatically with every empire, faction, and alien civilization they encountered. The notion that such a brazen, uncaring act could be committed by the most powerful force in the galaxy seemed impossible to ignore. To most, it felt personal. The United Nations, Earth's governing body, convened in an emergency session. The leaders were divided. Some wanted to find a peaceful resolution, to send a stern but measured response to the Empire's actions. But others, those who had witnessed the grief of Alara's family, saw it as an attack, a declaration of war. Among them was General Mia Cortez, a veteran military leader known for her calm demeanor but unyielding will. Cortez had always believed in diplomacy, had always been a champion of peace. But as she looked at the faces of the parents of the slain child, something within her shifted. "You can't reason with an empire like that," Cortez said to her fellow leaders. Her voice, calm but steely, echoed in the room. "They don't see us as equals. They don't see us as people. And if we allow them to treat us this way, there will be more deaths, more children. We owe it to Alara to make sure this doesn't happen again." Her words struck a chord with many. Within hours, the decision was made. Earth would no longer beg for respect or understanding. Earth would fight back. General Cortez, now appointed to lead the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition, began the task of uniting humanity's military forces. The response would be swift, unrelenting, and ruthless. Cortez's first task was to contact Dr. Julian Kane, one of Earth's brightest scientists and engineers. Kane had been working on a project for years, an experimental new class of weapons that could potentially level the playing field between humanity and the Empire. He had kept his work largely under wraps, fearful of attracting the attention of Imperial forces. But now, that secrecy was no longer a concern. "I'll get them ready," Dr. Kane said, his voice heavy with both determination and sadness. "We'll have weapons unlike anything they've seen before." Cortez wasn't one for speeches, but this time, she knew it was necessary. Standing before her newly assembled fleet, She gave them a simple message, one that would resonate with each person who would fight alongside her. "We are not weak," she declared. "We are not helpless. This is our home, and we will protect it. For Alara, for every child, every mother, every father. We will not rest until the Empire knows that humanity will not bend." The first response from the Galactic Empire came within days, an insult wrapped in bureaucracy. They dismissed Earth's outrage as an overreaction, calling for negotiations that would only serve to placate Earth's leaders. But this time, Earth would not be placated. The war had already begun, even if the Empire didn't know it yet. As the fleet began to assemble, humanity's resolve grew stronger. The war was no longer just about one child. It was about dignity. It was about proving that humanity, no matter how young or small in the grand cosmic scale, had a right to exist on its own terms. And so, with anger and righteousness fueling their every move, humanity began to prepare for the inevitable. The Galactic Empire would soon learn that humanity, driven by love, grief, and an unwavering will, could not be ignored, no matter how far across the stars they reached. The war had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The Earth Defense Coalition, forged from the chaos of Alara's death, began its preparations in earnest. General Mia Cortez, though surrounded by advisors and strategists, spent most of her time alone in her command center. The weight of what was to come pressed down on her, the loss of innocence gnawing at her every thought. She had seen wars before, witnessed the brutality of battle, but this time it was different. This time it was personal. This time the stakes were higher than ever. As Cortez scanned the latest reports, her mind raced. Earth had no experience fighting an empire as vast and powerful as the Galactic Empire. Their fleets were unmatched in size, their technology incomprehensible. Yet, Cortez refused to be intimidated. If there was one thing humans had always excelled at, it was survival. And survival, she knew, was a matter of will. She turned to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Hale. Tall, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, Hale had always been a steady presence at Cortez's side. But now, as he laid out the tactical maps before her, the weight of the coming war settled over him too. His hand hovered over the holographic display, tracing the lines of Earth's defenses, already stretched thin by the Empire's technological advantage. He was one of the few who had seen combat against the Empire before, having fought in small skirmishes on the outskirts of human territory. He knew that Earth's forces were no match for the Empire in terms of firepower. But Hale also knew that Cortez wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. "General," Hale began, his voice firm, "we've started mass production of the new fleet ships Dr. Kane's team developed, but they won't be ready in time for the first strike. We need to act fast." Cortez nodded, her eyes narrowing in thought. "We don't need the new ships yet. We need time to learn their tactics, to adapt. The Empire won't expect us to hit back this quickly. We'll use that to our advantage." Her words were sharp, measured. She wasn't the type to throw away lives for a quick victory, but she understood the need for aggression. They needed to take the first step to prove that humanity would not be passive in the face of their oppressors. Dr. Julian Kane, meanwhile, was busy in his lab, a secluded facility nestled deep beneath Earth's surface. A brilliant but eccentric scientist, Kane had spent years working on weapons that could potentially level the playing field between Earth and the Galactic Empire. Now, those weapons were almost ready, but he knew time was running out. Cortez had made it clear that Earth couldn't afford to wait much longer. Kane's lab was filled with holographic displays, equations, and blueprints. His fingers moved with the precision of someone used to working alone, but there was an unease about him that hadn't been there before. He had always believed in the potential of his creations, but as he stared at the weapons in development, he wondered if humanity was truly ready for the price of this war. Dr. Kane, his assistant Lena, said, breaking his reverie, "The modifications to the energy shields are complete, but we need to test them before we can send them out to the fleet." Kane ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the time. "There's no time for testing. We have to send them out now. If the shields hold up against an Empire cruiser, it'll be enough. We can't afford to wait until they're perfect." Lena looked at him, hesitant. But there's no but, Kane interrupted. We need to trust in what we've built. Humanity's relying on us. Lena nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She respected Kane's genius, but she knew the risks. These were untested technologies. If they failed, Earth would be in even greater danger. But she also knew that Kane was right. The war had already begun, and they couldn't afford to be left behind. At the same time, Cortez met with her advisors in the war room. They had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. The Galactic Empire was formidable. Its fleets were vast, and its leadership ruthless. Earth was still finding its footing, learning how to navigate this galactic war. But Cortez had a plan. We will target the Empire's supply lines, she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience. We'll hit them where it hurts. We'll cripple their ability to resupply their forces, to reinforce their fleets. And we'll do it with precision. No indiscriminate strikes. We take out their resources, their power. We'll bleed them dry. The room fell silent as the advisors processed her plan. It was bold, risky, but it was a plan that had the potential to shift the tide of the war. Cortez had always believed that the best way to defeat a stronger enemy was to make them fight on your terms, force them into a position where they couldn't rely on their overwhelming strength. There's one more thing, she added, her gaze steady. We need to send a message. The Empire thinks we're weak. It's time they learn how wrong they are. As the days passed, the first Earth strike was planned. The target was a key Imperial resupply station near the edge of their territory. The plan was simple. A small but highly coordinated strike force would infiltrate the station, disable its defenses, and destroy the supply depot. It was a risk. There would be no time to evacuate if the plan went wrong. But Cortez knew that sometimes, to win, you had to take risks. In the hours leading up to the mission, the tension in the fleet was palpable. Cortez sat alone in her quarters, looking out over the vast expanse of space. Her thoughts were consumed with the reality of what they were about to do. This wasn't just a mission. This was the first step toward ensuring that Earth would never again be the victim of the Empire's cruelty. But at what cost? She was snapped from her thoughts by a soft knock at the door. Hale stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You ready, General? He asked, his voice low. She met his gaze, her resolve hardening. Ready as I'll ever be. Together, they walked to the command center. The operation was about to begin. The war had started in earnest. The Empire would soon feel the sting of humanity's first strike. And from there, it would never stop. The Earth fleet moved in silence through the darkness of space, a vast armada of ships, all meticulously arranged and prepared for the first real strike against the Galactic Empire. General Mia Cortez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the holographic map before her. The target, an Imperial resupply station, was nestled in the quiet expanse of the Outer Rim. In theory, it was an easy mission, a small, lightly defended installation that would serve as a perfect test of Earth's new military capabilities. In practice, however, Cortez knew that nothing would be easy in a war against an empire as vast and technologically superior as the Galactic Empire. Lieutenant Marcus Hale stood nearby, watching the same map. His face, usually calm, now showed a flicker of apprehension. This was the first real offensive action against the Empire, and while the target was relatively insignificant, the implications were enormous. A successful strike would send a message to the Empire that humanity was no longer to be underestimated. It would show them that the loss of Alera's life, and countless others, had forged a resolve that would not break. But a failure, if they failed, would solidify humanity's position as nothing more than an annoyance, a rabble of primitives that the Empire could crush without effort. General, Hale began, his voice steady but tight, our fighters are ready. We've encrypted the battle plans to avoid Imperial detection. It's a simple strike. Get in, disable their defenses, destroy the supply depot, and get out. The fleet is in position. Cortez nodded, her gaze unwavering. Keep the pressure on. No mercy. We show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Hale's lips curled into a thin smile. Understood, General. This is for Alera. A quiet tension settled over the command deck. There was no room for error. Every soldier, every pilot, every technician was prepared for the risks that lay ahead. But what they couldn't prepare for, not entirely, was the weight of the message they were about to send. This wasn't just an attack on a resupply station. It was an attack on the Empire's very arrogance. The countdown began, and Cortez's mind was sharp, focused. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself now. Her thoughts drifted for a moment to her earlier conversation with Dr. Julian Kane. Back on Earth, Kane's new technology had proven invaluable, and they had done their best to modify Earth's ships to make them more competitive. But even with new shields, upgraded weapons, and enhanced starships, they were still outmatched. The question that gnawed at Cortez was whether they were ready to take the fight to the Empire, knowing that their chances of survival were slim. The thought lasted only a moment before Cortez dismissed it. There was no room for hesitation. Earth's forces would have to fight smarter, harder, and with more heart than the Empire could ever anticipate. Humanity had always been the underdog, and now they were fighting to show the galaxy that being underestimated was the Empire's greatest mistake. "Engage," Cortez ordered, her voice resolute. The Vanguard and its fleet of ships surged forward, disappearing into the blackness. The battle had begun. The attack itself was brutal in its precision. Earth's fleet arrived at the Imperial station undetected, the fighters slipping past the radar systems with ease. A small squadron of Earth's most experienced pilots, led by Captain Lucas Carter, descended upon the station, their ships darting in and out of the station's periphery. Carter was one of Earth's best, a quiet, brooding leader who had volunteered for the mission despite knowing the risks. His confidence had always been a source of strength for the squadron, but even he knew the magnitude of this operation. "Fox Squadron, stay sharp," Carter's voice crackled through the comms. "We're in and out. No heroics. Disable the shields and the supply lines. We're not here to play with them." The fighters closed in on their target. The station, once a symbol of Imperial invulnerability, was now nothing more than an obstacle, a stepping stone on humanity's path to freedom. As Carter's squadron disabled the first wave of shields, they encountered resistance, small but fierce. Imperial drones and automated turrets popped up from the station's surface, firing at Earth's ships in rapid succession. For a brief moment, Carter's heart skipped. The Empire was quick to respond, and their firepower was impressive. But Earth's pilots were quicker. "Target the shield generators," Carter barked, weaving his fighter between enemy fire. "Take them out, and we make our move." Earth's fighters worked as one, systematically taking down the station's outer defenses. Their movements were choreographed, a dance that had been perfected in simulations but had never been tested in real combat. Until now, the station's automated defenses began to buckle, and the once imposing fortress started to crack under the pressure. In the command center aboard the Vanguard, Cortez observed the progress with a tight-lipped focus. She could feel the weight of every decision. With each blast from Earth's ships, she saw the outcome of Alara's death, the collective grief of Earth's people, carried out in fire and fury. Every successful strike against the station was a small victory in the larger war to come, a war that was only beginning. But there was no turning back now. "Prepare for the second phase," she ordered, watching as the Imperial defenses crumbled. "We move in once the shields are down. No hesitation. We're going to finish this." Hale nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're locked in, General. The station is destabilizing. If we move in now, the Empire supply lines will be completely disrupted." The signal was clear. It was time. The Earth fleet moved in, cutting through the station's outer hull with a precision that even the Empire could not have anticipated. The resupply depot, the station's main objective, was set to detonate in minutes. There was no time to waste. Captain Carter's voice came through again, this time with a slight tremor of victory in his tone. "General, the station's down. The supply depot is going critical. We're pulling out." The mission had been a success. The first strike had been delivered, and it had shaken the Empire to its core. For the first time, they had seen humanity fight back with a vengeance, and it had cost them. The strike wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of something much larger, something the Empire could no longer ignore. As Cortez watched the remaining Earth ships pull back into formation, she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. The Empire had been dealt a blow, but the real battle was still to come. And in that moment, as she looked out at the stars beyond the vanguard, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The blow to the Imperial resupply station had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, but it wasn't long before the Empire struck back. General Mia Cortez had anticipated retaliation, but the ferocity of the counterattack still caught humanity's forces off guard. In the aftermath of their success, Earth's fleet had retreated into the shadows, trying to avoid the Empire's vengeful eye. But the Imperial forces were relentless, and it was clear that humanity's first victory had ignited a firestorm they could not outrun. On the vanguard, Cortez stood with her senior officers, reviewing the incoming reports. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As much as Earth had managed to cripple one of the Empire's key supply lines, they had made an enemy far more dangerous than they had imagined. The Empire had sent an entire fleet to hunt them down, a force that was far superior in terms of numbers and technology. The fleet was massive, a colossus of battlecruisers and dreadnoughts that seemed to swallow the stars. "We've underestimated them," Hale said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the room. His eyes flicked nervously to the map of space, showing the rapidly approaching Imperial fleet. "They're not just sending a punitive strike. They're sending everything." Cortez nodded grimly, her fingers tapping the edge of the holographic table. "They're not playing around. They want to make an example of us." "How do we respond?" asked Commander Liana Farrow, a seasoned tactician who had fought in several campaigns on the front lines. Her voice was calm, but edged with urgency. "We can't face that fleet head-on. Our forces are spread thin as it is." "We won't face them head-on," Cortez replied, her voice cool and measured. "We fight smart. We use every advantage we have, our speed, our agility, and our knowledge of their tactics. We hit them where it hurts, and we hit them fast." Farrow hesitated. "And if they overwhelm us? If they breach our lines?" Cortez's gaze hardened. "Then we fight to the last. But I'm not planning for failure." In the coming days, Earth's fleet made preparations for a new type of war. It wasn't one of all-out, direct conflict. It couldn't be. They didn't have the resources, nor the firepower, to take on the Empire in a conventional battle. Instead, the strategy was one of attrition. Hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, and disrupting supply lines wherever they could. Cortez had learned a hard truth in the wake of their first victory. Earth's only hope was to fight with precision, not strength. They had to become a shadow in the Empire's eyes, striking when least expected and retreating before the Empire could respond. Dr. Julian Kane, working tirelessly in his lab, understood the stakes better than anyone. The new weapons Earth had developed were impressive, but they were still a far cry from what the Empire had at its disposal. Kane was determined, however, to find a way to level the playing field. He had spent sleepless nights refining a new prototype, a weapon that would amplify Earth's advantage of speed and maneuverability. The problem, as always, was time. The Empire's retaliation was already on the horizon. Kane's assistant, Lena, watched as he ran his calculations again, frustration etched on his face. "It's still not enough," he muttered to himself, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. "We need something more." Lena, ever the pragmatist, leaned over the table and placed a hand on his shoulder. "What are you thinking, Julian?" He glanced at her, his face set in a grim line. "I'm thinking it's time we push the limits of what we can do. We need to move beyond just improving our weapons. We need to find a way to disrupt the Empire's entire command structure." Lena frowned. "You're talking about a direct strike on their command hub, aren't you? A gamble like that could cost us everything." Kane's eyes burned with a resolve that bordered on obsession. "If we don't make them afraid of us, they'll never take us seriously. We need to give them a reason to hesitate when they come after us. If we can hit their command center, disrupt their ability to coordinate, we might have a chance to change the course of this war." Meanwhile, on the vanguard, Cortez was deep in thought as she reviewed the reports coming in from the scattered Earth fleet. There were whispers of a possible attack on an Imperial communications relay, a key part of their command structure. Kane had been vague when he brought up the possibility, but Cortez knew one thing. It was a high-risk move, but it could be a game-changer. The Empire had always relied on its superior coordination to maintain dominance over its territories, and if that coordination was broken, the Empire would have to rethink its strategy. General, Hale's voice interrupted her thoughts. We've intercepted a transmission from one of our recon ships. The Empire's fleet is massing near the Galantis system. It looks like they're preparing for a large-scale offensive. They're not wasting any time. Cortez's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. What's their timeline? 6 hours, Hale said grimly. We don't have much time. Cortez stood up, her mind racing. The decision was clear now. They had no choice but to strike first. Earth's fleet would have to move quickly, faster than the Empire could react. They would hit the Imperial relay, cripple their ability to command, and buy themselves precious time to regroup. We move out in 3 hours, Cortez said, turning to her officers. Prepare for a stealth mission. We're going to give the Empire a reason to fear us. The next few hours were a blur of final preparations. The Earth fleet, small but growing in strength and resolve, prepared for its next strike. Every pilot, every officer, every soldier knew what was at stake. This mission could change the tide of the war, but it could also be their last. As the ships departed the Vanguard for their mission, Cortez stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the vast expanse of stars. The Empire was coming. They could feel it in the air, a storm on the horizon, one that would shape the future of humanity. And in that moment, Cortez knew there was no going back. The war had escalated beyond her control, and now there was no choice but to face the storm head-on. The Empire would know their name, and they would learn to fear it. The mission was set into motion with a precision that left no room for error. As Earth's fleet approached the Galantis system, General Mia Cortez stood in the command center of the Vanguard, staring at the flickering map of stars. This operation was the culmination of weeks of planning, countless simulations, and the desperate hope that this time, Earth could strike a blow so devastating that the Empire would have no choice but to hesitate. The Imperial Communications Relay was located on a small moon orbiting a gas giant, heavily guarded and situated in a remote sector. It was the perfect target, isolated, vulnerable, but crucial to the Empire's command network. We've got one shot at this, Hale said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. He glanced at Cortez, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a rare edge of concern. If we're detected, we'll be facing the full brunt of their fleet. Cortez nodded, the weight of his words not lost on her. The plan was risky. No, it was a gamble. Earth's fleet was smaller, weaker, and they were stepping into a hornet's nest with a single goal: disrupt the Empire's command structure, destabilize their response, and buy humanity precious time. But one misstep would cost them everything. We move in fast, hit hard, and get out before they can even react. No unnecessary risks. Understood? The officers in the room nodded, their eyes steely with resolve. Everyone knew the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message to the Empire that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. Dr. Julian Kane, back at Earth's command center, was in his lab once again. His hands flew over the controls, watching as his latest modification to Earth's stealth technology was deployed. The new systems were experimental, but they had to work. The mission was already in motion, and the Empire's sensors would be scanning the area for any sign of the fleet. If Earth's ships were spotted, the Empire would descend on them like a swarm of locusts. Dr. Kane, the stealth systems are activated, Lena said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. We're cloaked. We're good to go? Kane nodded, though a deep sense of unease lingered in his gut. There was no room for error in this mission, and he had pushed the limits of his technology to make it happen. The new system, while promising, had never been tested under real combat conditions. It was a risk, but like Cortez, Kane knew they had no choice. Earth's survival depended on it. As the fleet entered the Galantis system, the silence was palpable. The stars stretched out before them, vast and uncaring. But for the first time since the war began, Earth's fleet was striking at the heart of the Empire. Cortez stood at the bridge, her eyes fixed on the monitor, where the Imperial relay loomed ahead. The moon was a dull, gray rock, its surface dotted with Imperial installations and automated defense systems. The station was well defended, but Cortez had planned for this. They had the element of surprise. "Fleet is in position," Hale reported, his voice steady but with an edge of excitement. "We're on course for the relay. We'll reach the moon in 30 minutes. Cortez took a deep breath, her mind whirling. The moment of truth was near. No mistakes, people. This is what will determine the outcome of this war. On the surface of the moon, hidden deep within the shadows of its craggy cliffs, the Imperial defenses were already on high alert. A handful of smaller reconnaissance ships had picked up an anomaly in the system, but nothing large enough to warrant immediate action. The Empire was not yet aware of the threat bearing down on them. They wouldn't be until it was too late. As Earth's fleet closed in, the first wave of fighters detached from the main ships, their sleek, fast designs slipping past the moon's gravitational pull. The fighters were cloaked, invisible to the Empire's scanners. Their pilots prepared for the first phase of the operation. Captain Lucas Carter led the charge, his fighter dancing between asteroid fields as he communicated the precise plan to the rest of the squadron. "We have one job," Carter's voice crackled over the comms. "Disable their communications arrays. No mistakes." The fighters swooped low, avoiding detection by the Imperial automated turrets. They streaked across the moon's surface, heading straight for the relay station. In the distance, the gleaming structure loomed, a symbol of the Empire's iron grip on the galaxy. Earth's ships cut through the shadows, unseen, like a whispered threat in the night. The first strike was swift. Carter's squadron descended upon the relay, targeting its power core and jamming signals. As they executed their plan, the first round of explosions echoed across the station, sending shockwaves through the airless moon. A blip on the Empire's sensors flickered for an instant, but it was too late. The fighters were already pulling back, moving out of range before the Empire could respond. The relay was down, its systems crippled. Inside the Vanguard, Cortez allowed herself a brief, silent moment of satisfaction. But there was no time to celebrate. The fleet's main assault was about to begin. "We've done it," Hale said, his voice tight with a hint of relief. "The relay's down. We've disrupted their communication lines." "Good," Cortez replied. "Now, let's get out of here." The remaining ships of the fleet surged forward, their speed and maneuverability their only advantage in the face of overwhelming odds. The Vanguard led the charge, its sleek hull cutting through space, followed closely by Earth's warships. They moved quickly, weaving between asteroids, using the moon's terrain to their advantage. The Empire, slow to react, had no time to regroup, but they wouldn't be caught off guard for long. "Imperial fleet inbound," Pharaoh's voice rang out across the bridge, her voice laced with urgency. "They're coming in hot." The Empire's ships, massive and looming, had finally detected the breach. The fleet, though momentarily disoriented by the loss of their communications relay, was now mobilizing. Cortez's heart raced as she looked at the map. The Empire was closing in fast, and the window of escape was shrinking by the second. "Prepare to break formation," Cortez ordered. "We're not waiting around to be hunted. Everyone follow my lead." With that, the fleet veered off in separate directions, using their agility to confuse the Imperial fleet. The Empire's massive dreadnoughts tried to chase, but Earth's ships were faster, darting through the void like shadows in the dark. The chase was on, and for the first time since the war began, the tables had turned. Humanity had dealt the Empire a blow, and now they were making their escape. But Cortez knew this was only a temporary victory. The war was far from over. The real fight had only just begun. The fleet's narrow escape from the Imperial retaliation had been a victory, but it was a fleeting one. As the Earth ships scattered into deep space, moving far from the Galantis system, General Mia Cortez knew the harsh truth. The Empire would not let this insult go unanswered. The question was not if they would strike back, but when and how. In the quiet moments after the battle, Cortez found herself in her private quarters, looking out the window of the Vanguard. The stars beyond seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos she had just witnessed. The brief adrenaline rush of their successful mission still thrummed in her veins, but it was already fading, replaced by the ever-present weight of responsibility. For the first time, she allowed herself to reflect on the cost of this war. Every victory had its price. Lives lost, resources drained, and the mounting tension of fighting an enemy far more powerful. A soft knock at the door pulled her back to the present. "General?" Hale's voice was steady as always, but Cortez could hear the concern beneath it. "Come in, Hale," she called, turning away from the stars. The door slid open, and Hale entered, his expression unreadable. He carried a datapad in his hand, the data fresh and likely disturbing. "I've just finished reviewing the latest intel," Hale began, offering the datapad to her. "The Empire is already regrouping. We can expect them to launch a counteroffensive within the next few days. We've disrupted their communications, but they've already started shifting their tactics." Cortez took the datapad, scanning the information quickly. It wasn't surprising. The Empire was vast, its reach nearly limitless. Their resources were nearly infinite, and their ability to adapt was unmatched. The fact that they hadn't crushed Earth's forces in a single blow was a testament to the resilience of humanity, but Cortez wasn't deluded enough to think that the Empire would go easy on them. "Not now. We can't outrun them forever," she muttered, more to herself than to Hale. "I don't think we can outrun them at all," Hale said quietly. "But we don't have to. The plan isn't to escape, it's to make them bleed." Cortez looked up, meeting his gaze. There was fire in his eyes, the same fire that had led him through countless battles. "What's your plan?" "We go on the offensive again," Hale said, a trace of grim determination in his voice. "We hit them where they're weakest. They're sending their fleet to neutralize our remaining strongholds. But there's a vulnerable point we can exploit. Their shipyards." The thought of attacking the Empire's shipyards was both brilliant and terrifying. It was a risk, a massive one, but it was the kind of bold move Cortez knew they needed. Disrupting the Empire's ability to build more warships would buy humanity critical time. But it wouldn't be easy. If we attack their shipyards, we risk drawing their entire fleet down on us, Cortez warned, her mind running through every possible outcome. And we have no guarantee of success. They'll reinforce those stations immediately. "We don't need to destroy their entire shipyard," Hale said. "We just need to send a message. A hit-and-run strike, enough to cripple their production for a while. If we time it right, we can disrupt their flow of reinforcements and ships, force them to divert resources to the defense of their facilities. It's a tactical shift that will keep them guessing." Cortez considered this, her fingers tapping against the datapad. It made sense. The Empire's ability to churn out ships at a terrifying pace had been one of the primary reasons they had dominated the galaxy for so long. Cutting off their supply of new vessels could slow their offensive and give humanity the breathing room it desperately needed. "All right," she said, a decision settling in her chest. "We'll go after their shipyards. But we do it my way. No unnecessary risks. We hit them hard, and we leave. We can't afford to get bogged down in a prolonged battle." Hale nodded. "Understood. I'll begin organizing the fleet for the operation. But there's something else we need to consider." "What's that?" Cortez asked, her tone wary. "We've learned something from our earlier raids," Hale said, his voice lowering. "The Empire isn't just about brute force. There's a more subtle weapon they've been using, their intelligence network. We've intercepted communications that suggest they've already infiltrated several of our high-ranking officers." Cortez's stomach tightened. An inside betrayal was the last thing they needed right now. If the Empire had spies within their ranks, it could spell disaster. "Do you have names?" she asked, her voice cold. Hale hesitated, his face tightening with concern. "We're still gathering intel, but there are some indications that it may be deeper than we think. We may have to deal with this while executing the mission." "Fine," Cortez said, her mind already working through the logistics of handling both a covert spy network and a full-scale military operation. "I'll handle the spy network. You focus on the shipyards. We can't afford any more distractions." The two exchanged a look, understanding the gravity of the situation. There were few luxuries left to them. No time to second-guess or waste resources on distractions. The war was at a critical juncture. Earth had survived its first blow to the Empire, but they could not afford to be complacent. If they didn't keep pushing, if they didn't keep the pressure on, the Empire would grind them into dust. The stakes were higher than ever before. As Hale left to begin preparations for the raid, Cortez sat down at her desk. Her fingers hovered over the terminal, uncertain for a moment. She could feel the weight of every decision pressing on her. The path ahead would not be easy, but Earth's survival depended on their willingness to take risks, to push back against an empire that had taken everything from them. The war was not over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, Cortez felt the faintest spark of hope. If they could hold on just a little longer, if they could outsmart the Empire at every turn, maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance.